So you're very, very welcome. I wish we were seeing you in the flesh and could see your faces, but lovely to know you are all with us today, and lovely to virtually welcome our speakers this afternoon. I'm delighted to be joined by Cecily Brennan, who's artist and founder of the amazing artist campaign to repeal the Eighth, and also Donna Romano, who is head of NCAD Library and NIVAL. And just to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Glennie, and I'm the director of NCAD. So this afternoon, this event this afternoon is part of the second week of a 5-week program we're running called Aftereffects and Untold Histories. It's an amazing 5 weeks online program curated by brain meld after the gremlin has got to Elisa Kleist and Kira Maloney. And it's part of NCAD's contribution to a wider EU project, Internationale. By finding us today, the program runs until May the 15th, and it's commissioned by NCAD and it's presented in partnership with IMA and NIVAL. You found us today, so you found the website. So I'm taking it that you can see the program. So I'm not going to list all the events, but just to say, please do keep an eye on the program. There's some great things coming up, and keep an eye on NCAD's social media for future events. But today's event is a really important one for NCAD and NIVAL. It's something we've been wanting to do for a while to mark the really important and very exciting news that the archive from the Artist Campaign to Repeal the Eighth has been acquired by NIVAL and will be a really integral part of NIVAL's collections going forward. So we wanted to, and also should just mention, and we'll come to this later in the talk, through the acquisition to NIVAL also become digitized and widely accessible through the digital repository Ireland. So we wanted just to mark this very important acquisition with a moment to reflect on the work of the Artist Campaign to Repeal the Eighth, hear a little bit more about it, and just to think through a little bit with both Donna and Cecily what it means for that work and this incredible archive now to be part of NIVAL. So I'm going to start by talking to Cecily a little bit about the Artist Campaign, and then bring Donna in to talk about the wider resonance in relation to the acquisition. And we'll make sure there's plenty of time at the end for questions, and I'm sure there will be. Questions will be through the chat as we're in the webinar format, but please do submit your questions and I can put them to the panel. So Cecily, after just to give you a moment to calm after panicking about technology, but just wondering if you could just take us right back to the start of the Artist Campaign, which started in 2015 with 4 of you, your colleagues Alice Maher, Eithne Jordan and Paula Meehan. Really that conversation where you came together and thought about starting something and what your ambitions were and your kind of impetus for that motivation at that point.
Yeah, I think it was interesting when we were talking the other day about people talk about the intergenerational aspect of the campaign. And really, on reflection, I was thinking it's not surprising that 4 women in their 60s started the Artist Campaign, because we had lived through the 60s and 70s and 80s and seen the impact of particularly the Catholic Church on women's lives, on family lives, and the reproductive rights for women. And just to put it in context, maybe not everybody knows what the Eighth Amendment means. To repeal in terms of the Constitution is to remove. So to repeal the Eighth Amendment was to remove the Eighth Amendment from the Constitution. And what had happened was in the early 80s, there had been a huge push by the Catholic Church and right-wing forces in Ireland, the best way to describe it, to deal with the issue of abortion for once and for all, and to make sure that abortion would never be available in Ireland. They spoke of Ireland as the last bastion of Christianity. And they were extremely successful because they had so much power in their hands, but morally we know they were beginning to lose their position, but at that stage they were still very strong. And the Catholic Church pushed it through, and there was a referendum called, which was very successful, got the amendment into the Constitution. And one of the reasons they did that, in order to remove an amendment to the Constitution, you have to have another referendum. So we lost I think it was 39% of people voted against it being put into the Constitution, which is quite a sizable number at the time. But we lost anyway. And over the years, I think we would all say, the four of us, that it was something that overshadowed our lives as women and as Irish citizens, and that the Eighth Amendment undermined the Constitution. Whatever you felt about the Constitution was written in 1937. So fast forward to 2015, we were all sitting around having a drink after an Eithne meeting. And I said, I think that we should do something about the Eighth Amendment. We'd all tried to do various things at various times. And I think that artists would support a campaign. And everybody thought that's a great idea. So off you go, off you go. No, that's not true, really. But anyway, we were all four, equally energized about this idea. And it was just before the same-sex vote. And that looked like it was going to be a landslide. So there was a clear indication of a real change, sea change in Irish civic life and Irish politics. And one of the things on looking back on it was that the thing that was stopping something happening about the Eighth Amendment was not the citizens, it was actually the politicians. They didn't want to touch it as an issue. It was toxic for them, there was nothing in it for them to support abortion. So it was a matter of a push. And there was no talk of a referendum in 2015. We couldn't get to meet Leo Varadkar or Francis Fitzgerald. They didn't want to meet us. They just didn't want to do anything about it.
Yeah, it took a while.
And it was really because of the tragic circumstances in which women died. That was one of the significant things that made a huge difference, that they could no longer do nothing about it. So anyway, sorry to
that's great.
To give a kind of context to the fact that we had all watched this unfolding the whole of our lives, the whole of our adult lives. I was 27 when the Eighth Amendment was put into the Constitution. And like this, so.
And as you said, like in 2015, the referendum felt a very long way off.
Yes.
But you were recognizing a particular moment where you thought a civil voice could be heard again, or there was a space for this kind of activist voice to be heard. Did you have a sense of of what scale the campaign was going to get to? Like what the kind of end result was? It was just about the beginning, was it just about raising this up again as an issue?
Our campaign or the whole campaign?
Your campaign.
We didn't know. We knew, it started off as a website with people signing up their names. All of the material culture, all of the events, all of those things grew organically of artists saying, I'd like to do something. I'd like to make banners. I'd like to organize an event. And it was very organic, which is one of the reasons I think why it worked so well.
Was there a particular sense at the beginning? You were talking to your peers. You were, as you say, coming out of an Eithne meeting. So these were the people that you had worked with, had been friends with, had been part of your life. So these were the immediate people that you would go to think, what can we do? But was there a sense within the group of what can we do as artists? Like what would the artist voice bring into this space? Or was it more a kind of personal impetus to just...
No, I think we launched the campaign at a press conference in August 2015 in Bosworth, and at that we had 250 signatories to a statement that we had written calling for repeal of the Eighth Amendment, and it included very well-known artists, and we, right across the board, not just visual arts, but theatre and everything, actors, everything, and we were well aware of the power of celebrity. And how that could get us publicity, which is what we were looking for. Yeah. So, and the people we asked were well aware of celebrity as well. They knew that they could get something in the Guardian, international or whatever. So it began to build in that way. So
in the kind of artist element of it initially, and remained an important element of it, as you say, was where Ireland celebrates its artists, using that celebration of artists.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, Ireland celebrates artists who doesn't do anything to help them, but they do celebrate them. We know that. And by the end of the time, I think we could fairly legitimately say that every working artist in the country had signed up to the campaign. You know,
and people working in the arts, and it became a framework.
Yeah.
But you have always been very clear that this was you acting an artist as an individual, creating as generating activism. It wasn't your practice. This wasn't a route for you to be making work, and your work wasn't
no.
you as an individual artist.
You know, if you talk about copyright, I suppose you could say that everything that an artist makes is art. But I think that we felt that we were using elements of our experience and practice in a different forum, but we weren't making artwork in that sense.
But as the campaign grew, it did kind of move into cultural spaces. Like there was the number of really significant events at the project.
Absolutely, yeah.
At Eva. So you saw those spaces as, the cultural spaces as spaces where impact could be created.
Absolutely, and we felt we felt that the project was our natural home. That was where we should be. I had my first show there in 1982, and that was the place that had been started by artists, and it was the place to be. Yeah, and Cian was very generous. We got the building for nothing for a whole day, the whole building, which was how we could do the day of testimonies. So it was that kind of generosity. But we made it clear in all of our literature that we would never ask artists to do anything for the campaign. Yeah.
But the kind of, I'm interested in just the kind of idea of the artist campaign and what that meant. So as you said, initially, some of that was just using it for a publicity and attention, and using the kind of celebrity of artists in Ireland. But I wonder if there was a discussion as well, or a feeling of the kind of the expertise, the views, the strategies that artists could use that would have real impact and potential in this space, and create a very forceful voice.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like I said about the celebrity thing, because I think that is something like John Borman or Ed O'Brien, people like that at that level can get a lot of publicity. But that was really great and really useful, but that wasn't really, I had the idea, I don't know, we felt that artists would support the campaign, and they did. Nobody we asked to sign the statement at the beginning, the 250, nobody said no, and so it wasn't, you were pushing an open door, I think. It was structured so that we kept in contact with people through social media or through email, because we realized that artists are solitary workers. And I know I was saying to you, and this is a very small thing, but I personally was hoping to reframe how artists were viewed, because they're viewed as solitary and romantic and uninterested and apolitical and, selfish, or whatever these ideas that there are about artists. And I wanted to actually change that perception, because I don't think it's true.
And I think that was one of the, in terms of the legacy, and we might talk about the kind of legacy in a minute, but one of the things for artists and for the creative sector was that I remember being on one of the marches and seeing midwives for choice, doctors for choice, or teachers for choice, and artists for choice. What is normally quite a disparate, and as you say, group of sort of solitary workers into that very clear civic space as a voice with an opinion.
And they were fantastic. I mean, people were so supportive, and I've said it before with the banners that Alice and Breda and Anya and I know there's a fourth person, and Sarah made, marching with them was, it was wonderful. It was a great feeling to have these beautiful objects that were made especially for the campaign, that understood all the history of banner making, suffragettes, that you had this whole history behind you. And I thought that was just exquisite. I kind of felt once those banners came out, we couldn't lose,
Yeah. And I think it may not have intended as a space for work to be made, but some fairly extraordinary work.
Yeah, made unique work.
Yeah,
really.
and I think actions like the March in Eva
Yeah.
will remain very significant moments in kind of artistic production in Ireland, as well as the role that they played within the campaign.
Yeah. Yeah. And as Alice says, they made them with the best materials so that when it came to it, the National Museum couldn't refuse acquiring them, so the political message was unfolded in these beautiful materials, which is really unique.
Just, it became huge and very dominant. How did it affect your own work during that time? Like, could you find any space to be an artist during it? Did that become a
I'll be losing my canoes. It certainly affected my work, but it did, yeah, because I kind of but I took on most of the administrative work and different aspects, like the Day of Testimonies, curating that and stuff like that. But I did it totally willingly. I made a decision to do it, and everybody was working really hard, so I wouldn't regret it for a moment, because we won. And that's the most important thing.
And I just wanted to think, before I'm conscious of bringing Donna into the conversation and bringing us into discussion of Nival, but you're saying that one of your ambitions was sort of reframing how artists are seen in society. And I think that is one of the kind of key legacies of the campaign. But I wonder if you've had a chance collectively as a group to think about the legacy and to reflect on that. I mean, I was interested what you were saying at the beginning about the generational aspect of it. It was started by a group of women who lived through this very, very difficult period. And one of the overall, I think, takeaways for all of society from the campaign around the referendum was this very, very strong cross-generational conversation between those that were there in 1983, had lived through that and the very difficult period afterwards, and a younger generation who'd been very activated by the very tragic events like Savita Halappanaar. Do you think that one of the legacies for the artist campaign was perhaps a kind of cross-generational relationship amongst artists that hadn't been there before?
I would find that very difficult to answer. I mean, I certainly think, we feel a sense of pride about the campaign. One of the things I think that's interesting that artists can do is that what they do at times, they build something from nothing. They go, I have an idea, I think I'll do this. And then they start doing it and incrementally build something from nothing. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why the campaign was so successful. I mean, it was 4 people saying, let's do something. And then the whole campaign was paid for by the sale of the badge. So it was getting, there's all this stuff about merch and tote bags and T-shirts and sweaters and all that kind of stuff. And we just produced one badge and that paid for the whole campaign. And that was people all over the country, from the Glucksmans to Crawford to Galway Arts Centre to all these shops selling the badges and sending in the money, and Dara, one of our amazing activists, having to count the money and bring it to the bank, and, but it was like, that's what kept the campaign going. And there was this sense of community and communal activity, which is really invigorating. We don't get a chance to do that very much.
But I think it's interesting what you say about reflecting on the project being the rightful home. It sort of also speaks to that kind of that legacy of artistic practice that's about making something out of nothing, like people together and using a very limited amount of tools available to them, being resourceful. I mean, these are awful words that people talk about, artists being resourceful, resilient, entrepreneurial, and too often that's an excuse for not giving money or supporting them to do this. But I think that kind of idea of the badge being the kind of simple mechanism through
it was just really smart.
Yeah.
Because it was just clear, there wasn't any confusion. We weren't being left with loads of merchandise that we couldn't sell, and there was awful stuff produced, just truckloads of it. So,
yeah.
But I mean, that was just what we chose to do.
So just starting to think about I suppose it is that idea of the legacy. And once the campaign was over, how quickly did you start to think about the idea of there being an archive, like, you know, the reflection?
Well,
back?
I had collected all this stuff, and the night of the vote, myself and Trish Griffin, who I'll talk about more, was the kind of savior of the archive in many ways. We were having a drink in the hotel after the vote, and I was exhausted. And as we staggered out, she said, if you want me to help with anything, if you think of anything, just let me know. And I immediately went, the archive. I didn't say it to her. Like this light bulb went on over my head. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, we started working on it. Because I thought, if we don't do it now, we'll never do it. So I did collecting all this stuff, and we tried to put it all together. But she did the really detailed, you know, that Donna will know, the ACRAA 1.1.24, ACRAA, you know, all that stuff that you have to do. But we did get help. We met a guy called Tom Quinlan from the Keeper of the National Archives, and he was really helpful. And a guy called Ger Byrne, who is chairperson of the Archives and Records Association of Ireland, just to get it right, who was also really helpful. They advised us, because I wanted to have it in a shape that I wanted to have it in before we handed it over to NIVA, you know. So there was a bit like writing a biography. And
was NIVA always the place for it?
Always. Yeah, there was never any other place. Because of Donna, that I had known over the years in NIVA carefully, you know, looking after everything was there. And also Eddie Murphy, that Alice and myself were, you know, really fond of, who just built a wonderful library. So it really was the place for it to be, yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, it's great that you were able to acquire it.
Well, we were absolutely delighted to. This might be a good moment to, we've got some images, so I was thinking we might just show them if we can screen, and then bring Donna into the conversation.
Yeah.
And Ceci, as we show the images, would you maybe just not give a running commentary, but just explain what a few.
Okay, I'll see if I can remember.
Thank you.
Oh, I know this is a photograph of the International Women's Day March in 2018. And it was something great about marching up past the GPO up O'Connell Street. It was such an iconic kind of location. Unfortunately, Cleary's was closed throughout all of this
some of
time.
the banners that we were referring to that are now in the national.
Yeah, so, yeah, the beautiful banner. You see Dragon Slayer on the right. And Phyllis is here, maybe she will come in. I can't remember the name of this banner, I'm really sorry. But these are beautiful banners, and this is Sarah Cullen's banner in the centre.
I don't know if we're on a timer, or can we move? Oh, there we go. Yay, there you are.
It's for women of a certain age.
All looking great.
That was on the Rosie Hackett Bridge. It was an event that Trish, in fact, organised with her rowing club, Curragh Rowing Club, Get the Boat to Vote. So we were all there to cheer it on. It was I think it was the Sunday before the vote.
So really at the final stages.
Yeah. That's a really bad drawing by me of a shredder. I was trying to do some stuff to get some ideas for participatory things that people, you know, people who are supporters would want to do something. So we said, you know, shred the 8th, and eventually we had a download on the website where you could actually download a particular print of the 8th yourself and print it out at home and then shred it. And some people shredded it, some people tore it up into bits, some people, I know at least one, we have a photograph of one very famous writer, I won't tell you who it is, eating it. And, you know, so it was really just people could have fun.
Those recordings are now part of the archive. This is
it's loads of them. Yeah, loads of them. People sending them in from all over the world.
Preparation material, but also the actual, the activation.
There's a certain satisfaction of hearing the thing disappearing. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
So
doing
Bennett, yeah, that was another one, but we didn't do that because it was too hard to video yourself throwing a piece of paper into a bin. That got
Reading
bin.
also was part of the project activation as well. Part of the day in the project. I remember.
They are terrible drawings, my goodness. So there you are with that's at the Art and Action in the NCAD, the gallery, the event we did in the gallery, which was great. And you had a big industrial size shredder, which was great.
And that's an archive box provided by Nival that was used to scoop up the bits that were on the floor and bring them back to the library.
Archivist in action.
Oh yeah, they're actually archived, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. Oh, there's another image of this procession as well. This is Anya's really meticulous planning for the procession in Limerick, and it just worked so well. That's lovely. You know, these ukuleles were part of the procession, and lots of other people. So yeah, I don't know if people have seen the film, but it's on YouTube.
So this was part of Eva in
2018.
And there's the badge down in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, my year's model.
I think these are Anya's drawings for her small banners, which she called bannerets. And the eye was a motif that came through over and over again in terms of the banners. In other words, you were being watched. It was the idea of we're watching you, we're watching what you're doing. You know, we're expecting you to do what we ask you to do. And these are the drawings. These are Alice. Well, I think that one of the things about the banners is that the makers, as far as I know, didn't identify themselves personally with particular things. They were made as a totally collaborative idea. But this is the Madonna of the Eyes. Again, the eyes coming through again, where she's got the 8th symbol from the badge under her cloak. Oh, yeah, and just to say something, the shoe in that image, the red shoe, if you go back here, see the red shoe? That refers to Janet Mallarney, who has that lovely carved wooden sculpture with the red painted foot.
Where did the original logo, the original image come from, the 8 before?
That was my idea, but I had a different, I said to the designer, I said, I want an 8 and that it should be scratched or gouged out, which is much more my kind of thing. But he came up with this beautiful red, almost blood red X across the 8. And Paula says, it looks like, it's like an exoskeleton or something. It's like we're bearing the inside of our bodies on the outside by wearing these badges. And I think that they did create a great sense of solidarity and community. You saw people wearing them.
Recognizable. Yeah.
This is, as you can see, this is Breda Mayock, Lisa Godson, Anya Phillips, Rachel Fallon, and Alice on the floor working on Dragon Slayer. That's in Alice's studio in Mayo, as far as I know. And this is the room where we had the shredder in it was like they had some of the material in a kind of vitrine from the campaign, and then photographs, and so some of the press. See, they're the celebrities: Neil Jordan, Holland Wherry, Cillian Murphy, and Marion Keyes. They were the people who, like Marion Keyes was so generous, and Cillian Murphy, all of them actually, was so generous with their commitment to the campaign. Ah, Eddie Murphy, smoking.
In his office.
In the library, presumably.
In the library.
Yeah, well, anybody, I mean, there are many people obviously who won't know Eddie, but he just had a really special place, I think, in every artist's heart, I think anybody who dealt with him. I remember coming into Nival and finding my file and saying to Donna, there was loads of stuff in my file I'd never even seen. And there was a kind of an act of extraordinary, I know that's what libraries are supposed to do, but you know, they don't necessarily. And there's such an act of extraordinary generosity to find that somebody had collected all this stuff related to you without you even knowing it. It was just really, really great. And he knew that, I mean, as from working as artists, we know that if our artwork isn't collected in an institution, there's a good chance it won't survive, just in the way the world is. And you need to deposit your work, if you can, in somewhere that's going to take care of it. And that's what, you know, we were doing. That's what Trish and I knew we were doing, was we were putting together this material to make it easier for the people in NIVAL to negotiate and archive correctly in the way that Claire and Donna could do, and we couldn't do. We could only do a kind of skim of it, you know.
It might be a good time to thank you very much. Can we stop sharing the screen? It was great to see those. So that all of those, just to give you, give the audience just a snapshot of the richness of material that's now with us in NIVAL. So thank you, Cecily, for that. And everyone involved in creating that archive and bringing it to NIVAL. Just want to bring in Donna now, who's been sitting patiently listening. I was wondering if you could just reflect a little bit on looking back to the history of NIVAL and what NIVAL's relationship to artistic practice, and that is, as Cecily had said, that very strong relationship directly to artists and artists' work. Where this archive and the archive of the Artist Campaign now sort of sits within NIVAL and its relationship to that history.
Well, there are quite a few words that have been coming out through the discussion so far that really resonate with NIVAL's history and NIVAL's practice. And I suppose within the library, we're in the habit of latching onto keywords. They do kind of, they pop out quite routinely in these kind of discussions. Words like communal and democratic, visibility, this kind of the sharing of the public, the inclusivity, collaboration, those kind of things. They're all very much the founding principles of NIVAL. NIVAL is nearly 25 years old now as a formal collecting institution. But it was founded on this idea that in order to document the contemporary, which was such a vital part of the education in the college, that ability for students to be exposed to one another's works and to the work of their alumni, that in order to harness the information that was out there and make it available to others, it was too much of a task for a librarian or a small team of librarians to manage on their own, and that the only way that a practice like this would be successful is if the students were engaged in it as well. So Eddie began sort of single-handedly collecting documentation from galleries, ephemeral materials, and then also information from the press. But in his annual conversations with first-year students coming into the college, he would tell them about what he was doing in NIVAL, about how even the smallest bit of information that they had generated was of interest and would continue to be of interest and would actually grow in interest over time if it was kept and looked after. And so there was quite a significant level of buy-in from the student body as they moved through their studies in NCAD and then beyond. And Cecily herself, when she was a student, would have had that experience of Eddie not just talking about it in the library, but he would routinely go to the studios and visit the students in their spaces, and then once they left the college would continue that practice of meeting them and taking whatever they had generated and looking after it. And then over time that material was put into some sort of order, because naturally enough, you can collect as much as you want, you can save as much as you want, but if there's no order on it, then your ability to make it accessible is diminished. So that was sort of the second phase of NIVAL then, was how to keep it organized and how to make it available. So from 2001, I suppose, when I started and became, a great advocate for this practice, there were, I think, 6 or 8 filing cabinets of ephemeral documentation and about a dozen special collections or archives. And now we have, archivists like to talk in terms of meterage. So we have about 250 meters of ephemeral documentation. There's roughly 60 filing cabinets and over 100 special collections. So it has grown exponentially. It continues to grow. It goes from strength to strength. But really, it wouldn't be anything if it didn't have regular contribution and dialogue with artists who are practicing at the moment, and designers as well. I shouldn't leave out designers, because it is Irish art and design, and it's also non-Irish resident artists. So in terms of that democratic aspect, it's not just that it's not entirely developed as a collection by librarians, but even the artists who are contributing to it, they're not exclusively Irish. They're not just from the Republic, they're from the 32 counties. They're any artist who lives and works in Ireland and calls Ireland their home. It also comes from Irish artists who don't live in Ireland anymore and contribute information that way. So the ambition is always to be as comprehensive in the collecting policy as possible, and to provide the broadest possible context for what goes on here within the 4 walls of the library. So in terms of the campaign, I mean, in addition to it having some similar sort of founding principles, I think also the way that the management of the collection played out for the campaigners is kind of similar to the way that NIVAL established itself in the early days. This idea that you don't know exactly where this is going, and you don't know entirely who is going to want it to access it, but you know that it's important. You know that if you don't keep it, you will be written out of the history. And I think that was quite an important part in documenting the visual arts, and definitely in the campaign. And while you want to retain some level of control over it, you also want to allow it to develop organically. With those kind of things in mind, and those are considerations that staff in NIVAL would have on a regular basis when they're assessing collections, when they're talking to possible donors, when they're talking to students. We witnessed then on the streets and in the press and in exhibition spaces the activities of the campaign and the types of documentation that they were creating. NIVAL had established a file of its own on the campaign in 2005 with things in it like design drawings for the banners, with posters or leaflets, little things that we could get our hands on, and of course the press coverage. But it was fairly evident that there was a substantial record being built by the campaign itself that was not going to find its way into NIVAL unless a dialogue began. And when NIVAL approached Cecily, I have to say Cecily was delighted, and we were delighted that she was delighted. There was kind of like minds coming together. And I think, for ourselves, we watched with great interest, not only as the campaign developed, but as the digital record trail developed as well. For us to know that the campaign were mindful of its legacy, and I think it's fair to say for the campaign to know that another institution was very keen to assist them where needed and eventually take hold of the material. It was just a very exciting time and a very kind of positive movement, and I think that positivity continued right through to the point of deposit and beyond.
And I think that point you make, Donna, is so important, and you referenced it, Cecily, as well. Like, if things aren't held in a national collection, they get so easily lost, and there's so much practice that doesn't sit in that space of an acquired piece of work that sits in a collection. Like, this is where NIVAL becomes so important, and it's one of the things we've talked about a lot through this program. But the types of practice that are about a collective activity, or are about a kind of an activism, or a performative space, or a series of events, or a series of relationships, there has to be a really active decision to hold that and to record that. Otherwise,
you have to have somebody who's prepared to do it. Really, that's really what you need. You just need one person. But I remember always thinking of saying, you know, going on marches about various things over the years, and you know, at the end of the night, somebody say, "Who has the banner?" you know, the banner was lost again. You know, it's in the basement of Liberty Hall or something. You know, and that's what I kept remembering was, unless we do this now, unless now I have this amazing Trish Griffin who's offered to help me, and we had, you know, it was hard work, but we had a great time as well, and became very good friends. And she had all those skills, trained as an anthropologist, worked in New Zealand with the Maori in New Zealand, you know, so she had all of those academic skills of fine detailing that would have driven me absolutely demented. So, you know, we were balancing each other well, but I knew if we didn't do it then, we never would have done it. It just would have got left in a box somewhere, or on my computer somewhere. It's just, you have to do it there and then. But we knew how important the campaign was.
In terms of the sort of future impact or potential, you know, the results of that now being held, I suppose, you know, it's that difference from the Artist Campaign being something that people remember and talk about, to something that is archived, is there, can be researched, can be looked at, can really you know, become something concrete and tangible for people to come back to. What do you think is the kind of will be the resonance of this in years to come of the?
I don't know. I'm always pretty pragmatic about it. I don't think you should say anything that's terribly important about what you do.
Well, I'm not asking you though, Cecily. I'm asking Donna as the archivist.
Oh, Donna, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, from a librarian's point of view, it's equally as difficult to answer. I mean, it's so hard to anticipate, you know, research trends and interests and that kind of stuff. But I think our main concern within NIVAL is the actual state of the collection, and how we mind it, and how we promote it, and how we ensure that it is there for those who wish to find it. And so I suppose to take a slight step back, I mean, it is an exceptional collection from our point of view in NIVAL, because of the condition in which it came to us, because it was so well organized, and because it is so vast. I mean, at the original point of engagement when we started talking about keeping stuff, I don't think we would have anticipated that what was handed over to NIVAL would be over almost 3,000 digital files. It's very, very large, and it's the largest digital collection that NIVAL has. So it was kind of a first for us. I mean, when we went to the campaign and said, we want your archive, it was sort of like, really? Do we really want this? Because this is a new venture for us to have to manage this kind of material. And then there's additional, I think, nearly 300 actual physical objects as well. But what could have been a challenge at the point of acquisition has turned out to be an enormous benefit in terms of the legacy and the future interest and access to it, because NIVAL NCAD is a partner in the Digital Repository of Ireland. And we have a number of small digital collections in there already that resulted from a rigorous digitization process. Whereas with the Artist Campaign archive, the vast majority of the digitization was already done. So it was a matter of ingesting the items with all their descriptive data into the repository. No small task, but still a different project. But the end result is that, and we actually couldn't foresee this at the time that we began discussing with the digital repository, but they subsequently had a successful funding bid with the Wellcome Trust who are very interested in collecting documentation around reproduction rights. And so the repository is in the process of capturing a lot of social science data around reproduction rights and the referendum and the repeal movement. And so ours is one of the first collections to go into the repository under that sort of banner. And even though we're not part of the funded project through the Wellcome Trust, we will still sit side by side with these collections. The campaigns collection will be cross-searchable with all the new ones that go in there, which means that it's opening it up to a whole new audience of researchers and the public as well, because the repository it's an international resource. It's a web-based resource. So people who are interested in medical history, natural history, social science, women's history, as well as art and design and activism, will be able to find it there in the company of other dynamic collections. I mean, that makes NIVAL particularly happy because from the outset, although we were drawn to the activities of the campaign, and I think for a lot of us, that's where our sympathies lay, we were not averse to collecting the other points of view. I mean, it's important to say that NIVAL is very open in its collecting policy, and that had there been an artist campaign to retain or to not repeal the amendment, we would have been collecting their documentation as well. We have a few flyers, but there was nothing on the scale, nothing that came near the scale. And also, I think just as a side note, I suppose the campaign gave a visual identity to the need to change the law, a visual identity to an issue that is quite ugly, to put it frank, and has a lot of pain and trauma behind it. And the campaign made it vibrant, exciting, positive, amongst all of that. And so to see it sitting in the digital repository, it has an incredible visual presence that will be very attractive to researchers from all walks of life.
And I think it's worth, I want to open out now to the floor section. I'm just going to say, if anyone wants to start typing in while we just finish talking, if anyone wants to type in their questions, which is how we have to do it on the webinar, I can pick them up in a second. But while this Ireland had a successful campaign and things have changed in Ireland, they haven't. This is still an issue internationally. Yes. And I think that the accessibility of this archive through things like the digital repository and through the availability of NIVAL, and also we should mention, as you've referenced, Cecily, the banners going into the National Museum, this material.
Oh yeah. And the
Twitter archive.
Sorry, and the Twitter account has been archived by the National Library, which is great.
So it does create. I mean, one of our partners in the Internationale network, the Museum of Modern Art in Warsaw. Obviously, Poland is still in a very, very difficult position. But one of the aspects of our partnership is we've been, they wanted to connect with thinking around how artistic practice had responded to this issue in Ireland, and they'll be borrowing from both the National Museum and NIVAL for an upcoming exhibition they have in September, and they've been in touch with you, Cecily, I know, and a number of other practitioners. So I think it's, I know you want to downplay the sense of, not downplay it, but the kind of the future resonance, but I think it's a very important reference point, and both nationally and internationally. And I think having that, the availability of the material for people to come back to can't be underestimated.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. Can I just mention Claire Limer again as well, if you don't mind, because she was so important, and I felt I didn't mention her enough as I was talking. She's done such a superb job with the material that, Donna, maybe, I don't know who worked on it exactly, it's just my dealings were with Claire, and she spent a whole day here photographing the work, and she just had this real commitment to the project as well. So I just wanted to mention her again. But you know, I mean, you hope that somebody will say, well, you know, it is possible to change things. You know, that's what, you don't get involved in kind of this kind of activity unless you think you have a chance of changing things. I remember Eithne saying she talked to somebody in France, and because she lived in France quite a lot of the time, and he was saying to her, but you changed the Constitution. And she'd said, oh yeah, you know, and he was, what? You changed the Constitution? You know, it's such a, when you think about it, to actually change the Constitution is quite a radical thing. I'm not just saying we did it, so many activists for all of their lives, but it's quite amazing that you can actually do that.
And you know, from a personal perspective, I think it's so important that example of artists playing a role in that change is held in NIVAL and is there for students, and is that, you know, it's such an important moment for students to reflect on as they think about what it means to be an artist, and what their potential can be, and what their role can be within society. So again, I think, you know, the importance of that work in NIVAL, that connection to the student body, I think is
well, it's great to, I mean, if the archive wasn't there, the history would be lost. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we had a very nice evening out on some of the proceeds from the sale of the archive for all of the activists.
And I'm so delighted that NCAD resources were used for a good night out for all the activists. It's the best possible use of funds. So Alice, you're saying, there's a comment here from Alice, which I'll read out, saying,
okay,
disabled. So I might just check that we, apologies if we are, if people are having problems inputting, but it says, so chat is disabled, so this isn't really a question, but just to describe to you the collective joy of making work as a group and all the energy that was generated by cross-generational labour with a specific goal. We are entirely aware of how political struggles are wiped from history, so we even secretly embroidered our names into the hems of the banners, so that in the future they might be found, so that people would know that artists had fought for the rights of women. Well,
great.
I wish you could. I wish, as I say, Alice, I wish we could see you and hear from you, but it's lovely to hear from you virtually. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions coming through, or if the Q&A function is working. Oh, so just to say, yeah, I've just got a note here. So it's not through the chat function that the questions can be answered, but it's the Q&A. If you click the Q&A.
Oh, here, yeah.
Yeah. And if anyone does want to post a question there, I will just give it a few minutes, or we will take it that we've been so comprehensive in our discussion that we have answered everybody's questions.
I was spending a lot of time going through the archive on DRI because I hadn't, I'd gone in it looking for particular things over the last several months, and I hadn't actually spent a block of time with it. And it's absolutely amazing, I have to say. It was a very exciting time, but I just came across a quote from Paula from the press conference, the inaugural press conference, that it is just short and sweet, and I just thought it really sums up, you know, what students need to maybe hear or be reminded of, which was just, our traditional job as artists has been to reflect on the times we live in and to bear witness to the sufferings of those times. It was just a very simple statement to the press, who were kind of, you know, I think they were looking for more, weren't they? They were looking for you to put your head on a chopping block.
They were looking for us to make, you know, what we felt should happen with the legislation. I mean, I remember at the time saying, we're not doctors, you know, we're not lawyers. And in fact, we had spent a lot of time with the IFPA, who were really helpful, you know, going through the arguments, and what, you know, basically the message was, don't get tangled up in anything that has, you know, that you don't know about, you know. It's obviously it could have been a trap, but it was fine. We just said we're not doctors, we're not lawyers, we just want the Eighth Amendment taken out of the Constitution. So, but yeah, Paula is the best person for a suitable quote phrase.
Well, we have
As you
another
know, from her
phrase from Paula here. So some very nice comments and question coming through here. So Paula, and great you could join us today, Paula, but thank you all for a brilliant chat, and thanks for this safeguarding of memory. We were all aware of the amnesia around the revolutionary ideas of suffragism and the role of women at the foundation of the Republic. This archive will be a marker against forgetting.
And Paula has donated all of her collected poems, the collected poems from 1983 to 2015 for the period to the archives. So they're now in the archives. Well.
Fantastic, thank you.
So yeah.
Finola McTinnan, colleague from NCAD, not a question, but Eddie would have really approved. There's a wonderful sense of symmetry to this collaboration. I think that's
good.
And Kate Antisik Parsons, who's been very involved in the Aftereffects project. Thanks, Cecily, Donna and Sarah, for your thoughtful discussion. From a researcher's perspective, being able to access a collection like this, which is so well documented, is just an amazing resource. Cecily, would you see the potential from this collective experience of activism to make shared work in the future? It's interesting. So could you see yourselves coming together
on another issue?
Yeah, or as thinking about making work together. I think
it will be on Zimmer frames.
I think you need to downplay anything here.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. And we have become, you know, Alice and Paula and Eithne will attest, we've become very good friends throughout the whole process. You know, but I don't know, we talk regularly, but we end up talking about our work now and things like that.
I mean, there's obviously a very, you know, great friendship, but also a great creative energy, obviously, between you as well. And whether that, I suppose what Kate's kind of wondering is if that will lead to things in the future.
Yeah, I think that comes from the politics, though, as much as anything else. You know, that comes from politics as much as anything else. Like, you have to have an idea of what you want to say before you can say it. But I have no idea. Probably not. We'd probably say that's if we've done our bit.
Oh, there's more questions here. From Tom Creed. I have such strong memories of marching behind the banners that day in Limerick. Maybe a question for Cecily. Did this process affect your other work as an artist?
I find that hard to answer. It made me very happy at times, and it made me extremely frustrated at times. So it affected my making of my work.
I mean, you talked about the time impact and that being...
Yeah. I think it made me probably more fearless, something like that, you know. But I don't know if it really affected my work, no.
Sorry, I can't say I'm not being very good on my computer. Sorry. I'm showing my age. So I'm not sure if I've got all the questions, but I think, yes, I think that's, so unless there are any other comments or questions, just to say thank you all very much for joining us, and lovely that Paula and Alice could be here as well. And
great. I know Eithne couldn't, she said to me earlier on she couldn't make it. She was wondering if she could catch it later. So they would have all been here. If
this and all the events for Aftereffects have been recorded, and it actually, you know, and it will in itself become an important part of the archive, this discussion. But they'll all be available on the website. So anyone who wasn't able to join us today, but just wanted to say thank you to Cecily and Donna, but also I think just to say, I'm sure many of us would like to say thank you to all four of you for your incredible work that you did for the campaign, and for just, it's hard to think back to 2015, but at a point of where it did feel incredibly hopeless. It's easy, it became such a joyous and and it almost felt like an inevitable result, but it's so important to reflect back to how
we were all
undeniable
petrified.
it was, and how
Yeah.
right until the last moment, how uncertain it was, how difficult it was, and what a kind of painful process that period was. And I think the artist campaign created a real focus for everyone involved in the arts, and a real sense of force and drive and positivity, and it meant so much to so many people.
Oh, that's good.
Thank you.
Good.
All of you. Sorry.
Well, glad. Thank you very much for acquiring the archive.
Oh, well.
And it's really important to us. We're all absolutely thrilled. You know,
So are
really.
we. So
We're more
thank
thrilled.
you very much. We're all thrilled. Yes. We're all mutually delighted. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Now,
thank you, Sarah. That was great.
Thank you and thanks everyone for joining us, and have a very good, what a nice end to the week. What a very nice end to Friday afternoon. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Cecily and Donna.